of the Money Panel, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now, this channel is here to help you understand both the practical steps of managing money, the financial education side, but also to help you understand your relationship with money, because we know that behind every financial situation, there's a set of thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. And when we combine the practical element with the transformational relationship with money side, that's when the magic happens. Now, I'm a qualified financial advisor. I've been in the profession for 20 years, and I'm a multi-award winning financial coach and trainer. So make sure that you don't miss any of these videos. We put them out every single week on this channel. Hit the subscription button and the notification icon bell so that you don't miss out.
So I wanted to come on and share some tips today about 3 steps to stop that repeated cycle of overspending and how to overcome them. Now, this has come off the back of the Plug Your Money Leaks challenge that I've been running this week, but also with some conversations with a few people this week about food overspend. So I thought that I would take this particular food overspend cycle and just talk through the 3 steps that I believe would be really useful for you to think about how you can stop this repeated cycle of overspend. Now, clearly, if food isn't the overspend area, which it is for many people, this could be applied in any area. So what I want to talk about first of all are what are the reasons why people get into these repeated cycles. And we often see this with millionaires, for example, or people who win the lottery, is that they win an exceptional amount of money. And what happens is because their behaviors and habits have remained unchanged, they can end up in this repeated cycle of overspend and then actually end up spending that money very, very quickly. And that's because of this unresolved cycle of overspend. So one of the key things that I believe that you could actually think about to begin to kind of look backwards before you can look forwards is tip number 1, or the first step, so to speak, is to really identify the issue. Now, it may well be easy for you to kind of say, well, I'm overspending on food. But that isn't actually the issue. The issue is the underlying emotional reason that's actually driving that behavior in the first place. So, for example, most people who have a repeated cycle of overspend will be because they're being driven by some kind of emotion, whether that's stress, whether that's fear, whether that's anxiety, whether it's a sense of not feeling worthy enough. And I'll give you an example of how this plays out. So I had a conversation this week with a lady, a not unfamiliar conversation, and her area of overspend was food. And when I actually sort of went underneath the bonnet of why she was doing that, it was because she felt like she wanted to treat herself and her children, because she grew up living a fairly frugal life as a child, almost just having enough money to pay for things, and sometimes not having enough money for things. And so what that taught her is that she didn't want to give that for her children. She wanted to be able to give her children everything that they need. And so therefore the pattern of cycle there for her was that food is kind of being used in an attempt to kind of give her children what she didn't have. And this is really common. Often we try and give our families and our children and ourselves a life that we maybe didn't have ourselves. And so therefore she identified that quite easily that she was overspending in the area of food. And when I asked her how much she was specifically spending, she said approximately maybe 800, 900, maybe £1,000 a month. And she was spending it on her credit card because she gets reward points. And again, I see this happening on many occasions. But what was happening there is that she had the awareness that she was overspending on food, but she wasn't very specific in that awareness. So one of the things that I gave her to take away to go and do was to get real clarity and awareness on what actually is that overspend. Now, there's a few reasons for doing this and of it being beneficial to do so. One is that when you have that awareness, it empowers you. It puts the power back into your hands to enable you to then get on to step number 2, which I'm going to share with you in a moment. So if you're sitting there thinking, I do have an overspend issue, but I don't know exactly what that issue looks like, you'll probably surprise yourself. And sometimes it can be a positive surprise. Sometimes we think, oh my goodness, I'm spending 800, 900,000 pound a month on food, but maybe it's not quite as much as you thought. But maybe it is. Maybe it's actually more than you think it is. But that's okay. And I was saying to this lady, put some music on, put some positive music on, and just see this as an exercise to do to create that awareness for yourself, to put the power back in your hands. And I said to her, how would you feel if you had that power back in your hands? And she was like, well, I'd be more in control. And I said to her, well, how would that play out for you? And she's like, well, I'll be more in control. So maybe I'd start paying a bit more off my credit cards, and I would try to then get out of that cycle. So I was like, so she knows the solution. It's just actually getting a little bit underneath the bonnet of what's going on there. What's that awareness that's needed in order to identify what the overspend issue is. And what's also very useful is if you can identify the emotion behind it in the first place, that's also a double whammy. So if, for example, you know that when you're feeling stressed, maybe it's on the way home from work, and you feel stressed at work, you always go home via Marks and Spencer's, for example. You go with all good intentions to buy 1 pint of milk, and you end up with £40 worth of stuff in your basket. It's really common. And if you can identify that trigger, then you can reverse that by doing something different. That might be taking a different route home. So maybe you don't drive past Marks and Spencer's, or you don't walk past Marks and Spencer's. And so recognizing the emotion behind the behavior in the first place is also very, very useful. So that's step one. Step two is once you've identified and you've kind of looked back at maybe some of the emotional triggers, or really looked back at what you're actually spending to put that power back into your hands, then step number two is to look at what would be the next best step. With now you have this information in your hands, what are you going to do with that? So for example, if you're spending £1,000 on food, let's say in that example there, and you want to spend £800 and you think that's a realistic goal for you to have, then that £200 per month that you're saving, where are you going to put that? Now, the reason this step is really important is because you want to be able to visualize and think ahead. So that £200 a month, what are you going to do with it? What's the reward going to be at the end of saving that £200 per month? Does this make sense? So that £200 a month, let's say, could be put into a foundations pot so that you can start building an emergency fund. That £200 a month could be put into a personal development pot. That £200 a month could be put into a treat pot for the children, so that rather than treating them with food, you could maybe treat them in another way, maybe put it into an investment for their financial future. So rather than worrying about their financial future, you can start making some changes. Maybe it's that you could be redirecting that to pay off some of those credit cards to get those debts paid off quicker. So there's got to be, the step three to this is there's got to be a reward at the end of it. You've got to have that momentum. Otherwise, it's kind of just in your head. And what I hear a lot of people say is, well, I plan to do all these things. I have all good intentions, but it never happens. And the likelihood is because you're not following those 3 steps. I mean, you could kind of call it 4 steps if you're going to think about the financial, emotional connection with money. So let me just repeat those steps for you again. So step 1 is identifying the issue, bringing some awareness, and real awareness, not just approximate figures, real awareness of exactly what does that overspend habit actually look like. Step number 2 is identifying the want. So when you've identified and you have the power back in your hands, what are you going to do with that money that you're going to be saving, that you've identified in that awareness exercise? Where are you going to redirect that? And then step number 3 is how are you going to reward yourself for redirecting that, so that when you're walking past Marks and Spencer's and that chemical triggers in your mind and you're like, I need to go and buy this, you could think, no, because actually if I save that £25, that £25 is going to go into my children's university fund. So therefore the reward is I'm not going to have to worry about not having enough money in the future to pay for that. Does this make sense? So it's following those 3 steps. So I hope you found this useful. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Take care.